Okay, it's 30, so welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for sticking all the way to the end. This is the session of the co-working group in Montreal, IETF 24. I am Marco, my co-chairs are Jaime and Karsten. Of course, we assume people present here today to have read at least the drafts in the agenda. We try to make good use of the time here for face-to-face high bandwidth discussion. Not well applies coming in the next slide. You are tracked automatically by Miteco. Please join the meeting in Miteco. We have 2 minute takers for today, Christian and Ricard. Thanks a lot for them. Help them out. It's a collaborative effort. On the not well, this is the new not well. It will probably change again. Participating in the IETF, including participating in this session right now, you agree and you have actually agreed already to conform with the policies regulating our process. This is just a reminder with pointers to the actual documentation for the details. In case of more questions asked to the chairs or the ADs, it's especially about our code of conduct. Please be nice and professional with one another, and also about IPRs and patents. So if you're personally aware of any IPR that can apply to the technical discussion, you have to disclose or alternatively refrain from participating in the technical discussion. Practicalities, as usual, we've been recorded. If you are attending on site, please remember to join Miteco, preferably with the on-site tool, and in any case, keep your audio and video off. Join the queue first in Miteco, and then go to the mic, please. And if you're remote participants, try to use earphones as possible and keep your video and audio off unless you are presenting or talking. I'll keep an eye on the chat, so please write in the chat if you want someone for you to relay your comments or questions to the mic. This is the agenda for today, and after this introduction, we have 2 early slots led by Karsten on different points or core conf, and then correction and clarification for co-op. Christian will talk about updates on the document about URI path abbreviation in co-op with a new option. Then Giuseppe will present an update on the draft on performance measurement for co-op. And then we cover some items related to OSCOR. I'll talk about an update on a recent document on encrypting or hiding more information from the OSCOR option. And Ricard follows with the 2 documents on updating keys and identifiers in OSCOR. I'll give an update, including also the split into separate document on observed multicast notification. And then we have a number of documents related to alternative transports for co-op, Carles with co-op over bundle protocol, and then Christian for co-op over GATT. And we conclude with the document on non-traditional responses. We have Karsten as a placeholder in the agenda, but Christian will actually run the slot. Yeah, there's 2 documents in the agenda, the last 2 ones, in fact, co-op over GATT and non-traditional responses, that the chairs believed were on the right track to be soon considered for an adoption call. We just note that many people are going to leave the meeting before the end to catch their flights. So just be aware of that. Have a look at the documents if you haven't already. It's good if you form an opinion about that, because in a way or another, during and after the meeting, we are going to poll about it. Okay, a quick go through the document status. Great news. 2 days ago only, we got RFC 9876, good number, published. Thank you very much to the authors and the working group for this. This is great. It was a very good fix and enhancement to the registry. And it took a bit less than 1 year since the version 0 of the individual submission started. So that was a very good and quick effort. Related in other working group, we also had recently published RFC 9820, produced by the ACE working group, on using co-op with EAP. Back to core instead, we got since Madrid 3 documents approved for publication. 2, well, we're always proceeding together, the DNS over co-op as proposed standard, and the ALPN ID for co-op over DTLS as companion informational document. They are both with the RFC editor. And 2 days ago, or yesterday, I'm not sure anymore, yesterday, href was also approved for publication as proposed standard. That is also great. It's on in auth last time I checked, but still, we see editor. We have in ISG evaluation that, of course, the previous 3 document completed also since Madrid, 2 group communication related document, both as proposed standard. One is the actual transport of co-op over UDP and IP multicast, and one is the related security document defining group of score. The former one has a few discuss ballots to address. The second one instead has not discuss anymore, but for both documents, a new ID version is expected to be submitted for them to proceed. In and post IETF last call, in other working groups, we have the ACE document defining a way to distribute king material for group of score, of course, building on the ACE framework. That completed IETF last call. Next step for the authors is just to address those reviews. On publication requested, just yesterday, we requested it for the short simple document Youngsit Pen as informational for automatically allocated a number of ranges for seed identifiers and unshepherding that. The idea was for Carsten to cover it in the core conf slot. Probably is not necessary anymore, but in principle, it's in the agenda. And publication requested in another working group related to the document I mentioned before, in ACE, still related to management of OSCORE group. This is not about distributing keys, but more about administering groups for the sake of creating, configuring, and deleting them at the ACE-based group manager. Back to core, we still have 2 documents that completed working group last call and have to address the comments received. One is conditional attributes that Bill is driving and for which there's a few comments tracking GitHub issues to address. And then we have core co-op pub-sub led by Hame. There were a few small comments from me that were addressed. There was mostly an outstanding review from Christian to address before this can continue with the shepherded up led by Jesko instead. Okay, on yet other documents, there were a few working group documents that have been recently updated. That they were relatively small updates. We had to prioritize most of the work on other documents, especially the GroupCon documents. But these are next in line to address more substantial comments that they received, especially from Christian. And since Madrid, we adopted 3 documents, URI path Abrev in the agenda today, COP over bundle protocol, and they already advanced a number of versions already. And also the cacheable score document that is simply in version 0, starting its lifetime as working group document with no further update to present today. There were also some, 2 updated individual documents. One as lagged in the background for a while, waiting for other top-level group communication documents to be finalized, and one that we are going to have in the agenda on protecting more information in the OSCAR option. Having a look at other documents, other working groups, some working group documents were updated there, mostly in ACE as related to OSCAR in combination with EDOC or used for certificate enrollment, and also the use of ACE for distributing keys for the co-op pub-sub architecture specifically that, according to the chairs, should start a working group last call in the next few weeks. And there was also progress in working group documents in SHIC, in particular for the sake of compressing the co-op headers, obsoleting the currently existing RFC 8824 to produce a more comprehensive and up-to-date document. We also had to report an individual submission in TipTop from Carles. This is a document that used to be proposed in core as an informational profile of co-op for disk-based communication. It was clear that it belonged better in TipTop, where it is present now. As usual, a big thanks to the reviewers that provide to different extent, a different time of the process, reviews to these documents. Is very much appreciated. We need more, please do more. You get one ducky per review. We are keeping a balance, tracking that with an appropriate spreadsheet, I assure you. There's even more activity on the GitHub in a way or another. Please contribute. Again, we need more of your comments. A recap on the next planned interim meetings. We have a one-off on December 3rd. I guess we'll cover mostly URI path upbrev and core clar that are also in the agenda today anyway. And then we'll resume with an actual series on January 14 for 4 meetings until IETF 125. As usual, bi-weekly on Wednesday in the European afternoon. And let's say we should be in perfect time. And it's on Karsten with CoreConf. You have control.
Okay, tell me when I'm too loud. The big plan was to introduce the next version of the Komai document today. Unfortunately, other things intervened. So I will talk about 3 other things, one of which actually has to do with Komai. The SID drive, the new issue we are discussing on Komai, and the RFC 9254 instance identifier issue. So let's switch this on.
How about now?
Great. So about a year ago, we got into a position where we should have been able to generate official SIDs for all the Yang modules out there. And that turned out to be a little bit more complicated than we thought, in particular since the tool that is used for that is not very actively maintained at the moment. So we used the time at the hackathon to actually merge our various development branches. And we now have a tool to generate SIDs. And so we took all the Yang modules out of the RFC mod directory the IANA has, and generated SIDs. And we got 19,718 SIDs that we need to allocate. So this is a little bit of a logistical effort. It's not just about getting the documents analyzed and so on. It's also about making sure that we are not stepping on some documents where actually manual allocation was intended. So this is the first thing we will have to do, set up a list of modules that we want to exclude from this process because the allocation is manual. Then we have to take the number of SIDs in the range and create ranges with some margin. So this requires a little bit of manual intervention as well. And generate input to the IANA range registry, and finally generate the SID files and create input to the IANA module registry. So this is ongoing, and if you have a Yang module that would benefit from SID files, maybe just talk to me and we can discuss if there's any specific problem. The second item that came up, there is someone who actually implemented CoreConf, which is great, but they had a number of questions, and one is on this slide. So they wondered why we are still using RC Yang data in our specification. And this is not for the main activity of CoreConf. This is for error messages. So CoreConf defines an error message data structure where you can essentially do the equivalent of RFC 9290, send back problem details, but this is a Yang module for messages in flight. It's not for messages at rest in a database, but in flight. The question was, can we move to SX structure, which seems to be the new kit? And yeah, we don't want to do this every 5 years. So this is maybe a bit of a problem. On the other hand, we didn't steal this from RESTconf as much as we stole just about everything else. So this is really a true innovation on our side, and we cannot just say RESTconf does this, so why wouldn't we do this as well? So that maybe may speak for actually following this request. But then on the other hand, SX structure has been a complete tool support disaster. We still cannot validate our SID files because they also use SX structure. Of course, there's also an interesting question, which implementations actually already rely on RC Young data. So I don't know how many CoreConf implementers are in this room. This is usually a little bit of a very special crowd. If there is one in the room, in the physical and in the virtual one, please say so, and maybe write into the chat what you think about changing this at this stage. Next issue. The same person who rose the SX structure question implemented all of 9254. And 9254 is different from RESTconf because it can use SIDs in various places. So we had to invent a way we build instance identifiers out of SIDs. And what Wojtek actually noticed was that there is no text that explicitly mentions leaf list items, instance identifiers for leaf list items, or instance identifiers for keyless list items. This is defined in RESTconf. How you actually represent this in JSON. And we probably had in our minds that since it was defined in RESTconf, we wouldn't have to write up anything here. But reading the text, we don't have a reference to RESTconf here that says fill in the blanks from RESTconf. So this is a little bit of a problem. So what we have to do first, find out how to clarify this. I think what RESTconf does here is good. And but there may be people with other ideas. And then find out, do we actually have to do anything at all? Because it should be kind of obvious that we do this like RESTconf. Or do we maybe do a very small errata report pointing to RESTconf on this item? Or do we write a completely new document? So Wojtek actually has a document. Yeah, we have to find that out. And if you are in the room and interested in this subject, now would be a good time to write into the chat. Okay, corrections and clarifications. We have this living document, and we are supposed to work on this now and then, primarily in interims. But it probably makes sense to clean up two issues that came up in the context of URI path abbreviation. And I want to go into these issues and maybe get some quick responses. So one thing is that we never really said when you use a URI path and when you don't. So it's clear this is for talking to forward proxies. That's what the first sentence says. But it's not quite spelled out whether you only use proxy URI as a fallback when the individual options like URI path don't work, or whether it's the normal thing to talk to a proxy using a proxy UI. That's different people have different views on this. I have a very clear view. For me, proxy UI always was just a fallback, but other people read the documents in a different way. And that, of course, is also of interest if the client in this interchange actually is a proxy as well. So proxies are supposed to be a little bit more powerful, so they should be able to do the conversions implied here. So yeah, they should decide. Now, 12 years ago, we probably would have said, okay, so it's really important which one you use, but the new URI path abref option does not use the unsafe bit. So a proxy that manipulates the URI options, the individual ones or the combined one, the proxy URI, might not know, might be unaware of a URI path abref and do something that leaves the URI path abref by the wayside. So it suddenly does become a problem. Now the next problem is if we write up something, this is not so likely to actually reach those proxies that are currently unaware about URI path abref. So maybe we cannot really do very much here, but at least proactively we might want to say, okay, let's say you only use proxy URI if you cannot use the individual options. And Christian is in the queue.
Thanks for bringing this up. There is, you mentioned we can't reach the proxies. What I am reasonably confident of, but for an update we'd have to be more sure, is that no proxy has ever done this operation. And we only need to reach proxies that actually do this. And like all the implementations I've seen, nobody takes URI options and turns them into a proxy URI. I think this is mainly about reaching out and kind of getting confirmation that nobody we can reasonably reach has ever done this, and then this would be easier.
Eskodijk, I did wonder why the client would not use those URI path options, let's say, URI query options. So you say if the client cannot use it, but what is the reason they cannot use that?
The client is the first client or the second client?
Yeah, I thought the first client that you're talking about, that the very first one, the origin client.
Well, the original client is modern enough that it wants to send a URI path abref. So whatever we come up here can probably be considered by the first client. The question really is, do we have a way to influence the proxy and the client instance in that proxy not to do something that it doesn't know is a problem?
Yeah, okay. Oh, that's maybe the other part we're talking about. No, I thought before that you said that the client uses just a proxy or URI option if it cannot use anything else. So it's a fallback.
Yes, but that might be the first client or the second client.
As I wondered, yeah, okay. But for the very first time, so what does it fall back from actually? Because why couldn't it use, let's say, separate options like a proxy scheme and URI path and URI query?
That depends on the URI scheme that is in use. So if it's something with MQTT, it's probably a little bit more difficult to construct the URI. Now, nobody knows what the URI scheme for MQTT is, but this is the kind of example that we designed proxy URI for. So for CoAP, it's clear. For HTTP, it's pretty much covered, I'd say. But for different kinds of UI schemes, this is not so. And this is maybe because, maybe the reason why Christian never has seen somebody do this, because those other UI schemes do not see wide use at this point.
Think about mailing. You could reasonably have a proxy that allows you to post to mail to some email address, but like no proxy would convert into this. If it's a client that is doing it, so be it. But like that's not something a proxy would do.
Okay, I was just thinking that we are talking about co-op proxies, so they always use co-op URIs. But okay, the client might send something else, of course, to the proxy. And, what the proxy does with that, yeah, that's another question maybe.
We're talking about a client that talks to a forward proxy, so it knows that it talks to the guy, and wants that forward proxy to send a mail for it.
Yeah, but is that still a co-op proxy then?
It's a cross proxy. It's co-op on one end and eggs on the other.
Okay. Yeah, I just thought it was only basically taking a co-op message and forwarding as a co-op message and then co-op
No,
server would respond. I thought that was the use case.
we actually have a whole section in 7252 about cross proxies. So that is a consideration. Now, I again, like Christian, I don't know someone who has done that. On the other hand, writing a standard doesn't mean that you get to know everybody who uses it.
Sure, yeah. But okay, it would be good to clarify this at least, because I didn't know that what you said. Huh? So it looked to me like, okay, the client can use either the single option form or it can split in multiple options, and it doesn't really matter. It's just whatever the client wants, right?
That's a valid reading of what's in the document right now.
Okay.
It's not what I had in my head, but it's
Right. Yeah, that's how
valid.
people read it. Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So I have 5 minutes. Maybe I should go to the other item as well. But we definitely need to think about how to make this situation here a little bit less ambiguous. And maybe we have to create a few examples for that first. Issue 51 on correction clarification. The other one is really annoying. We have to deal with non-conformal requests, and sometimes these don't work. And the current text says if they don't work, you reject them, which is another way of saying you send a reset message, which is appropriate if what you just received doesn't make any sense for you. The problem is that the URI path abbreviation message really would like to see the 402 problem details that you get when you use an option that something on the proxy path doesn't support. So instead it gets back a reset or gets back nothing because the proxy may not be able to convert the reset into a 4xx or 5xx message. So what we maybe really would have liked at this place in the document, and I have heard from people that they are surprised before, we only really need to reject messages without more diagnostic information when there is no error response they can be processed into. So that might be a change. For people who believe in state machines, it's a significant change because we suddenly get a 402 message where we expected a reset or nothing. Yeah, it's much closer to why we have error messages and have a way to include problem details with those error messages. So that's one potential position. We want to have a correction in there that says, oh, we really only meant the reject for the case where there is no error response, the message can be processed into. Or we could make a change. And if we make a change, which document is it that we make this in? Of course, we could just piggyback that on the UI path abref, but then it would be too obvious why we are making this change. Any opinion on this? Have you been burned by not being able to send back an error message?
As Kodak, maybe I can just comment on that. So that seems like a good idea to correct that. Yeah, because yeah, I think Christian also in the chat said something similar.
Okay, anybody else? So here we also will continue the discussion in the GitHub issue for a while, but you of course can also send to the mailing list if that's more convenient to you. And I think I'm done.
Do you think of a correction in Corclar?
Well, yeah, that would be one place to leave it in, leave some more extensive explanatory text. If we decide this is really an errata we need to fix. Otherwise, it would live in Corclar until it goes into a document.
I'm also thinking of a precedent. if I'm not wrong, DNS over COP at some point needed to refer an ongoing correction or clarification. It started by referring an issue in CoreClar, and then it became a reference to a section of the right version of CoreClar. Something like that can happen here.
Yes.
With URI-path abref referring.
Yeah.
But possibly things incrementally. But
let's maybe write it up in the CoreClar document a little bit faster than we did at the time.
Yeah, and definitely these are welcome to come back at the next interim meeting in December.
Yeah, so in December, we really should know what we are doing here.
So even a pull request, hopefully.
Okay.
Thank you, Karsten.
So, speaking of URI-path abref, I think not sure if you wanted to lead over or just continue from here.
Sorry, Christian, ask for slide control again. It wasn't working for some reason.
I am.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. URI-path abref. Okay, so I think Carsten has already given away a bit about what is happening here, but let's still start like from the beginning. What's the motivation for this? People have been unhappy with how they have to put paths in their initial messages. Discovery in CoOP usually starts by querying well-known core and then going from there. And that's a kind of reasonably long, or that's a bit of a long path compared to what you're usually using for the discovered paths. And mechanisms that typically run before discovery, such as ad hoc or such as onboarding using Brewski, they don't have the benefit of having, like, they also have to go through that well-known mechanism, because basically BCP 190 tells us that we can't just go register /rd and state that this is how it is done, because that is what other STOs can do. Yeah, to a solution that we could use instead of like sending those names around all over the time is to use a very simple option. That option would be called URI-path abref. It's a numeric value option, number 13. And when it's present in a message, it's mutually exclusive with the URI path. The option stands in for the path, and it's like value 0 would expand to well-known core, and value 1 might expand to well-known RD and ad hoc and so on. And that fits in 2 to 3 bytes as compared to 17 or more bytes. Carsten told me that this has kind of the idea for something like this has been around already in the original CoOP design, but back then there was no clear use case and it was not done. I brought it up in 2021 as a solution for ad hoc, because well-known ad hoc is, I think, 1 byte longer than well-known core, so might have made sense there too. But the approach back then was a bit too broad, and also I was worried that this couldn't be done in time for ad hoc to be released. Looking back, it might have been possible, but bygones. So when this came up again around with the kind of EST people looking for workarounds for their long paths, I wrote this up based on the discussions also with Michael and Esko. And after working group adoption, the interims, here we are. It is now way easier than the previous versions. It's not trying to have all the extensibility built in. The options to do more complex things, such as multiple options, more complex values, interaction with URI path, it could be done, but this document does not try to do this. This document tries to stay focused, do a single thing, do the single thing right. Big question that was raised during the adoption call was, is this justified? Because yes, we are saving 15-ish bytes. What does it look? Does it matter in the grand scheme of things? And I think the best application here are the large ad hoc onboardings that ad hoc was really designed for, so that that were part of the requirements for the lake for any lake mechanisms, which then became ad hoc, to be charted in the first place. Was we have to have requirements, and a new mechanism has to satisfy those requirements. And this is where it makes a difference. The first 3 or 4 messages in an ad hoc exchange, there, when we send well-known ad hoc every time, this means like 20% savings that could be sent in. Over the lifetime of a device, that's peanuts, because the device would send hundreds and thousands and 10,000s of messages on a single context. But when many devices are all joining a network and everyone is spelling out that they want to talk to well-known ad hoc, then this does make a bit of a difference. For EST and Zebruski, it's not so much the over-the-wire effect, but there are important interactions with the standardization at large, because the current documents all take the HTTP documents and then create different names for the same well-known resources, so they fit in the requirements. And using the URI path abbreviation is just an easier way to get the same effect. Those documents, as does the ad hoc OSCO profile, profit from this most when they specify that the server must support this option. And by the way, the server must always also recognize the spelled out path, because if there is any kind of discovery, memoization of whether this can be used, fallback, then all the benefits of this are falling apart. So this really shines when there's a base document for whatever the client is using that says that the server must support it, and then the client can trust that it can send this option. I've implemented this in AIO Co-op. John has been so kind as to try implement this in lib Co-op with good feedback, but I think essentially it worked well. This is just a working group -02, but I think this is basically done. There are, and that might look a bit contradictory to being done. There are 4 issues open, but I think that effectively the response to all of them is to do nothing, or to say that, yeah, like, would be nice, but. So on use cases, I've just elaborated on one of them. If someone has more, please let me know. I've reached out to Marek, for example, who I know is doing a lot of ad hoc exchanges like all the time, can easily make a difference there. But I hope that the one that is in there and spelled out in the document is good here. I'm personally a bit concerned about how this could lead to people using more well-known rather than go through discovery. And mitigation here is that the registry currently is relatively closed down. This is a registry for IETF consensus documents. So whoever does something in there will have considered alternatives, because it's an IETF review document. I won't go into detail of the core club, because like Carsten mentioned them, they would both result in simplifications to the document, but I think we can't really, like, there are documents, and that's reaching to the next slide already. There are documents that are approaching a working group last call that would like to have a normative reference on them. Anything we do on core CLA will probably not go so quickly, and in the case of the proxies will not reach implementations quickly. So, in case of the reset, will also not reach implementations on any reasonable time frame. So the bit of complexity that is there, I think, is necessary. Yeah, that's it from my side. Questions, comments? Can we continue this?
Carsten Bormann, virtually from the middle of the room, no head. We will hate that we didn't put in the extensibility. We unfortunately don't know which part of an extensibility would have been useful, but we will hate it that we didn't. So that's just my little admonition to keep thinking about whether we need extensibility or not.
So comment about extensibility. Everything, kind of, the extensibility is still, the document is still shaped in such a way that it doesn't rule it out. So whenever someone has a document where they say, yeah, but I'd really like to have that extensibility, I'm happy to co-author in there an appendix that updates this and says, and by the way, you can do this as well. And this has no impact on any implementation that uses the unextended part, because if it can't use the extension, it's just as much an unknown option value as it would be if the whole mechanism were not supported.
That's good, Ike. Quick comment. So I did not read, I think, the very latest version. Of course, I will want to have a quick review of that. But yeah, to me, it also looks ready. Yeah, and talking about extensibility more, yeah, I don't know exactly what we are going to hate in the future, but so maybe just go with the simple version. That was Christian's proposal, so I also agree with that. Taking maybe a bit of a risk, but okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so the just a moment again. So the question that just came up, can we finalize this at the December 3 interim, which is about 4 weeks from now? If we have anything else useful to discuss, then this would be a good date for sewing this all up. If we are really just running out of time today, we might want to do this on the list. So this is really, well, I personally, of course, would like an example for how such a late stage extension would look like, but that's not a requirement here. But do we want to wait for the discussion on 51 and 52 to clear? Was there any other reason to actually sew this up in December only?
I think the discussion on the proxy could be useful for this document. On the reset, kind of we can't get so far.
Thanks. Then especially focusing on those issues, the discussion can continue on the list, and then we can have this as an agenda item for the interim on December 3. And after that, possibly with a minor update for a new version that should be ready for working group last call, I suppose. So finishing before, right. So starting immediately after the interim meeting. Does it work for you, Christian?
Works for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Next in line is Giuseppe.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is an update about this draft. It's a long time that we didn't present because we were working to the implementation, and this is an update I'm presenting on behalf of the co-author from Telecom Italia and China Telecom. Yeah, what is, just a quick recap, what is the motivation for this work? So we would like to propose a mechanism to measure the performance in co-op in order to meet the operational requirements, but we need a methodology that is not resource consuming, considering the application in constrained environment. So that's why we don't want to use methods, for example, that reads ID, sequence number, and store timestamp. So we are trying to find lightweight methodologies. The explicit flow measurement techniques employ few marking bits to make measurements inside the header of each packet. If you are interested, the methodology are described in the RFC 9506, published by the IPPM working group. In particular, what we want to propose here is the use of the so-called square bit, also known as alternate marking. These methods creates a square waves of no length as defined in the RFC 9341. This can be used for packet loss and delay measurement, because if you create a train of n packets, for example, these are well defined over your network and can be counted at each nodes, and by comparing the number of packets you can detect the packet loss, right? The same can be applied to the delay by selecting one packet with a special market packet. This can be used for delay measurement. To apply this methodology, we propose a new option for co-op carrying these bits, in particular the square bits. I just want to clarify that in the previous version, we tried to define two bits. One is the square bits that I'm describing here. The other is the spin bit that is already included in the quick protocol. The problem during our implementation is that the addition of spin bit in co-op is not feasible, because the measurement of round trip time, considering that the flow in co-op is not continuous, so sometimes the measurement of write trip time is too long and it doesn't make sense. So we prefer to not include the spin bit here. Otherwise you have to create some artificial flow in order to make the measurement and to have a continuous flow between client and server, but maybe it doesn't make sense to complicate how co-op works to include this delay measurement. So we include only the square bit. It works. It can be used for packet loss measurement. We also have other bits that can be used to communicate loss and delay events on path. Just a few words about what are the application scenarios. In the previous version, we already included and describe all the possibility in case we have non-proxying endpoints, collaborating proxies, non-collaborating proxies. I don't want to go into the details here because this slide was already described the last time and you can find in the draft, but this is just to say that this option, of course, can be applied end-to-end if we have non-proxying endpoints, but can be also applied end-to-end between client and server, on between collaborating proxies if we have collaborating proxies. If the proxies are not collaborating, the PM option is proxy unsafe and is unsafe for forwarding by proxy that doesn't understand it, but an implementation may still consider the option as safe to forward if the proxying are non-caching, of course. Anyway, there are different considerations that we did in the previous version in order to deal with the different possibilities there can be in the network. What is the implementation status? It has been implemented in IOCOP. The test of the packet loss measurement has been done. Also the delay measurement. For delay, we use the simple way to do that without the use of spin bit, like in Quick, like is done in Quick. Now we only have a missing check to do. We want to test the behavior in case of retransmission, because the packet counting can still be valid by recognizing the duplication of packets on the path. So this is the only missing point, because end-to-end it is still working, but on the path we need to recognize the duplication of packets in case of retransmission. Otherwise you will count more packets than the one that you are marking, right? So this is just to check if it is possible to recognize. We think that it is possible, but we still need to implement this thing. What are the next steps? So this draft is based on well-known methodologies applied in the relevant RFC here. Implementation has started, need to be concluded with these missing pieces. So of course we welcome questions and comments, and we hope to have, I don't know, a demonstration or during the hackathon or during an interim meeting in the future. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you.
Question, comments? Or...
But there's a question in the chat from Nikolai. Is this mainly geared towards co-op over UDP and DTLS, or does it also apply to other transports, TCP, GATT, bundle protocol?
To all
transport.
the transport, yeah. For now, we are testing especially UDP because it's more complex. I mean, it's for this kind of measurement, for TCP, it's much easier than UDP. So we are now focusing on UDP, but we will also test with TCP. But with TCP, we are more confident that it's work.
Thank you. Any other comments, question? So looking forward to see more results.
Yeah, maybe during some interim or during the next hackathon. Yeah.
Thank you, Giuseppe.
Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. This is Marco as an individual. We presented this update as an individual submission in Madrid. It's a new work, and since then we got good feedback, and because of that we updated the document scope, the document title, and the author list. So what's the problem? If OSCOR is used to protect co-op messages, an OSCOR option is present in the message, conveying mostly information required by the recipient to process correctly the message, and in particular to decrypt and verify it. It has in particular two message fields. Yes, some of them are optional in some circumstances, but assume they're just both there. One is essentially a sequence number as partial IV framed in red, and one is the identifier of the sender framed in green. And there's nothing encrypted normally in the OSCOR option. That's intentional to make the processing at the recipient side simpler. But of course, that information can leak up a lot of side information about the communicating nodes, allowing to infer behavioral patterns and even tracking the nodes across different network segments. So some long time ago, there was some initial thought on doing something about encrypting the partial AV, but whatever was supposed to be done had to be simple and efficient, and it sounded like not so worth it if nothing is done at the same time also on the KID, the sender identifier. So this work is supposed to take some steps in that direction, updating formally the OSCOR RFC. And the previous version of the document was already taking care of encrypted the sequence number. Now it's taking a step forward, also touching the KID field by replacing the original value with a stand-in ephemeral value that changes on a per message basis and replaces the original one. So that's the additional bit in this version of the document. The overall construct otherwise is the same, following the same philosophy. There's no in-band signaling in the message. And version 0 was supposed to be to work as is with Group OSCOR 2. This works with Group OSCOR 2, but it requires minor adaptations due to the KID alteration. This is all optional. The two peers establishing the security context, like they agree, for example, on the algorithm to use, have to agree on using this method to or not. If they don't agree, by default, this is not used to preserve interoperability. If they agree on using that, well, they use it for every message that they exchange, depending on the exact presence of the exact field. And this starts with the derivation of one additional key once and for all in the security context. We had it already in version 0. The only difference is the renaming. It's now more appropriate to just call it obfuscation key. Is derived using the same construct used for deriving the other keys in the security context. So the only change from version 0 here is the name. On the sender side, now we have two fields to take care of. One is, again, the partial AV, except for some renaming here is the same processing as the previous version. So take a sample of the payload, if need be, pad it all in a deterministic way. The result is called input one. Encrypt input one with a very lightweight AES ECB using a key deobfuscation key. The result is a key stream. XOR it with the plain partial IV. The result is the encrypted partial IV to put on the wire. Done. This is just like the previous version. This is new, and it follows right after the encryption of the partial IV. Take the same input one, so the padded payload, and flip the last bit. Call it input two, encrypt it with the same technique, with the same key. You have a different key stream. Now XOR that key stream with the latest encrypted partial IV. If you actually had the partial IV field in this message, well, that's what you computed before. You may be into a very strange situation where the message has a KID but not a partial IV. And in that case, the partial IV to consider is the partial IV of the corresponding request, because such a message is necessarily a response. This is really unlikely to happen, though possible in OSCORE, but is typical instead in group OSCORE, and this construct is immediately reused in group OSCORE then. Well, the result of that XOR is a stand-in ephemeral key ID that has nothing to do in principle with the original one, but yet it's placed in the KID field as a dummy identifier. And now the message is ready to be sent. Now what happens on the recipient side, the recipient in general has no clue what is going on. It's not even clear in principle if this is about the security context that uses this mechanism or not. So there are some assumptions to be made here. First, the recipient assumes that obfuscation was not used and follows by vanilla OSCORE the indications in the OSCORE option to retrieve a vanilla old school security context. And maybe it finds something. And if so, it uses it and tries to decrypt and verify the message. And that may work, and then it's done. If it doesn't work, the next step of the assumption is, okay, maybe obfuscation was used then, and it considers the set of security contexts that are set to do obfuscation, and those are basically those that include the obfuscation key. And then it's about going through them one by one. So take one, compute the same green input two, compute the key stream to reconstruct the dummy identifier. And if it's different from what is in the KID field, well, this is not the right context. Move to the next. If there's a match, that is likely the right security context. And I say likely because there's room for false positives, of course. But it might be right. So go ahead and use the context to decrypt the message. If it works, you're done. If it doesn't work, it was a false positive. Go ahead with the next one. And this builds on the fundamental observation that the involved AES ECB encryptions are extremely lightweight. And we are not really expecting these nodes to have several, not even hundreds, I would say, security contexts. It'll be a lot already if they are tens. So this should be feasible to do. This is the gist of the algorithm. In the draft, it's described addressing also corner cases and particular situations. Christian.
Yeah, thanks for this update. This is that's a good one. I have two questions. One is on key limits. So we've talked a lot about limitations to how often you can decrypt and fail OSCORE, especially with the short tag keys. If we now try one algorithm, try one recipient key, and it fails, kind of would that send that peer into a situation where it needs to rekey more often? And probably I'll let you answer that one before I go to the next question.
So you mean that the failure happening in the execution of this algorithm should play less of a role or no role in a counter for key update?
No, I'm saying that if you assume that it's not obfuscated and you go with decrypting that, kind of it might one in, especially if you're using short KIDs, it might one in I don't know 100 times or so produce a false decryption. And I don't know the latest numbers on key limits, whether that's a problem or not.
Please write this in the notes or in a separate
Okay.
mail. I need to go through it. Thank you.
Okay. And then in the interest of time, I'll probably do that same with the other question.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, the draft has already covered a number of additional things. To keep things simpler, some fields in the Oscar option are just avoided altogether because, strictly speaking, not needed and never mandatory anyway, in particular KID context. There are three very particular cases to be careful about, and we know how to handle them. The combined adhoc plus Oscar request, where this method simply cannot be used, but it's a one-off message in the whole lifetime of the communication. When using the key update protocol kudos that comes in the next presentation, you need to be careful of which exact context you pick up the obfuscation key from. There's only one context that both peers have at any time. It's the context they're trying to update. And then there's 6dish, that's a particular case. It uses Oscar. It does expect the field KID context to be present. We know how to reintroduce it also in a cosmetic fashion, so that it doesn't break 6dish, but still it achieves the goal that we want here. No time to go through details, but it's already written in the draft what minor adaptations you have to build on to make this work also with group Oscar. Check the draft, please. As next steps, we plan to consider a slightly longer size of the standing KIDs from 2 to 3 bytes, and that helps a lot with the false positives that then start becoming actually negligible. We got very good feedback from Martine during the hackathon. It would be good to introduce a sort of hybrid mode where there can be agreement on encrypted the partial AV, and building on that, there can be agreement or not to additionally replace the KID with a standing value or not. Because in some use cases, doing that would achieve the result that can be more efficiently achieved in a different way pursued by those use cases. For example, if using a very aggressive header compression that would elide that field anyway. We need to add more on particular cases when group Oscar is used, and we have to take care altogether of the second part of the draft, describing or suggesting at least means that the peers can use to build the agreement they look for. We have already a proof of concept implementation covering essentially the whole algorithm for Oscar. We should triple check that it's covering every single corner case, but probably it does already. So we'll come back with more gathered implementation experience in the near future. And till then, thanks for the feedback received already. More is welcome. Thank you. I'm switching control to you soon, Riccardo. So you have 2 slides, but for a slot of 15 minutes.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Off you go.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, I want to present some updates to the key update for Oscar draft. Can I get control to switch the slides, or you want me to say next slide?
You should have had control by now.
I do not have control.
Let me try again.
Yeah.
So now I have control, and I know why. Now you have it.
Yes, thank you. So let me jump right in. Right, just a recap about kudos. So this is for performing key update for Oscar, practically renewing the master secret and master salt, which will result in deriving new sender and recipient keys. You can achieve forward secrecy, and there's no change to the ID context or sender and recipient ID. It doesn't matter if you establish your original context using adhoc or it was pre-configured. And it's, you can say, loosely inspired by the current appendix B2 of Oscar. Practically, you start with a CTX old, and after kudos is finished, you have a CTX new with a new master secret, master salt, and keys derived from those. We did do a large redesign in version 10 to use a more flexible and simpler approach, practically defining a explicit state machine for kudos. It has a number of beneficial properties, can be initiated by either pair. It's also robust against like loss of state or reboots. Typically, you will finish it in one round trip. And it's also flexible in terms of the message flow. Any co-op message, whether a request or a response, can be a kudos message. You do not have to have coupled request response. You can have 2 requests or 2 responses, or any kind of combination, really. We have defined 2 types of kudos messages. This is not related to types of co-op messages, but kudos messages. And one of those is the divergent message, whereas a pair is offering its own nonce and has not received a nonce from the other pair. The convergent message is where you're offering your own nonce and you have received the nonce from the other pair. And this is the extended Oscar option we have defined to carry the nonces used, and also the X byte, which contains the length of the nonce, and some flag bits controlling particular features and behavior of kudos. For instance, if you want to run in no FS mode or not. And you can also see that one of the bits is the kudos message type. And I mean, practically these nonces and the X bytes are taken as input together with the old security context. And out of that, you produce a new master secret and a brand new security context. And why do we have the no forward secrecy mode? Yeah, that's because we want to support also very constrained devices that cannot store to persistent memory. This is an overview of the state machine, and you can see we have a number of states here. Now, typically, you would have a quite simple path to this state machine, basically going from pre-idle, idle, busy, and then back to pre-idle. You may end up in some of the other states, especially if there's packet loss or devices rebooting. But typically, you have a quite simple path to this state machine. And to elaborate a bit more on the state machine, one of the updates done now for version 12 is to add an ASCII figure illustrating the state machine. And it's aligned with, obviously, it was shown in the previous slide. And the state machine is also described in text in section 43. And, well, you can see they're also basically having these states, and then you have certain transitions between the states where you eventually end up with producing a new security context CTX new and achieving key confirmation on both sides. And yeah, another update we did was we actually added in an appendix multiple additional examples of message flows, because one thing we want to highlight is this point that kudos is not constrained to a request and a response, and that response is a response to that exact request. Rather, it's a lot more flexible. So now we have a number of further examples. For instance, kudos initiated with request message where the server is non-capable, meaning very constrained, so it has to use the no-FS mode, and also that server is rebooted. We have kudos like running 2 times in a row. We also have examples where kudos messages are actually lost. And we have an example with kudos finishing with 2 request messages sent at the same time from the peers to each other, basically. And in all these cases, we want to show that kudos successfully finishes and you derive new security context. So this is just one example that I put. We don't have to go through it in extensive detail, but this is the example of a successful kudos execution when you have a non-capable device that has rebooted. And I think the key thing to point out here is that basically on the non-capable device and on the both on the client and server rather, you will use the CTX bootstrap, which is your bootstrapping material. So you won't use the latest material derived, but rather revert back to original bootstrap material, because that's the only thing you have guaranteed to be still available on a non-capable device that has rebooted. And yeah, so what's the summary next steps? Basically, we have 2 implementations aligned with the previous version before this explicit state machine approach, one in Java and one in C for Contiki NG. And we plan to update both of these to be aligned with the latest design, and then obviously test them towards each other. And there was one procedure point to move some content relevant to SHIC from the SHIC 8824 update draft into the kudos draft, just because considering the timeline, that content is better placed in this kudos draft. And yeah, any comments, feedback, or interrupt test, whatever is very welcome.
Any comments on question? Anyone on kudos? Okay. And now I try to give you control of the other set.
Yes.
You should have it.
Yes, perfect. So now I will continue with another draft that actually started its life in the kudos draft. And this is about identifier update for OS core. So what is this about? Well, as the title may indicate, it's about updating the sender and recipient ID in OS core. So basically, you have a procedure can be initiated by either a client or a server. You start with an original context CTXA, and you decide, both pairs decide on new recipient IDs, and based on those, you derive a new context CTXB. And basically, it has a number of beneficial properties here. And for instance, we have introduced a mechanism where the pair that proposes a new recipient ID, it needs to have an explicit acknowledgement from the other pair to transition to using this new recipient ID. So both pairs have to opt in and agree to actually do this update. There are some finer details that you can't do this immediately following a reboot, because in that case, kudos must be run first just to avoid key and nonce reuse. And well, to summarize, the overall goal is to mitigate any privacy issues that due to message correlation and tracking of those core pairs. The design is in line with the kudos, basically kind of a similar approach. The procedure starts when a pair either sends a message with this recipient ID option stating what a recipient ID it wants to have, or it receives such a message from the other pair. And during the procedure, it's also kind of a state machine-based approach. The first message sent after the procedure has started must include this recipient ID option, and the other pair uses the recipient ID ACK option to acknowledge that offered recipient ID. And we also have some timers to make sure that, if there is packet loss, we ensure that the pairs will, with a regular interval, send a message with the recipient ID option. And so how does this process, either successfully complete or fail? Basically, if a pair has received 3 messages, including the recipient ID ACK option, it is now safe for that pair to delete the old context CTXA. But note that, that doesn't mean it has to be deleted at this point. And when at the same time, you can now derive CTXB. But one key point there is that you may very well want to wait to use CTXB until after network migration, because that's when you actually change either identifiers, right? So that's when you want to avoid being tracked through that network migration. So run the ID update before migration, get the CTXB ready, then do the migration and start using CTXB immediately after migration. The procedure can fail if what we call the ending timer times out. Basically, there's a maximum time limit for the procedure to stay open. So what did we do for version 5? Well, we did a number of editorial improvements. Otherwise, the main change here was to add further message flow examples, specifically 2. One is showing when the ID update procedure is initiated with a response message. And again, this is in the spirit of kudos, that you can really have any type of co-op message for executing this ID update procedure. And the other one, we actually introduced a failure case where the procedure doesn't successfully complete. And that's basically when the client repeatedly sends requests with the recipient ID option, but it never receives acknowledgements, meaning responses with the recipient ID ACK option from the other pair. So eventually, the procedure times out and you revert back to, basically continue to use CTXA as you had been doing all along. And obviously then you can retry the procedure. So this is this is that example specifically where you can see the client sending over and over multiple requests with the recipient ID option, but the responses do not contain the recipient ID ACK option. And eventually, you will reach this expiration of the ending timer, and following that, you're sending normal OSCORE requests and not using this procedure anymore. Yeah, summary next steps. I mean, one idea was now we have these two timers, the ending timer and repeat timer. So the ending timer is the overall lifetime of the procedure, and the repeat timer states how often should a pair that is running the ID-active procedure send a message including the recipient ID option. Now, an alternative to using timers could be using message counts instead, which could be more appropriate for certain use cases. So like you say, every fifth message you send the recipient ID option, or the maximum, time the procedure can continue is 10 round trips. Yeah, another thing we want to do is add more examples of running this procedure integrated with Kudos, because it can be run actually combined with Kudos. You update both the master secret, master salt, and your IDs. Yeah, we also want to make an implementation of this in Java based on the OSCORE Java implementation we currently have. And yeah, also for this document, any comments and reviews are welcome. Yeah, that's what I had.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Any comments, question, anyone? Okay. Okay, hi again. This is an update involving two documents now, consistent with what was planned and agreed already in Madrid on the topic of observed multicast notifications. So as a recap, this is a solution intended for use cases where you may have multiple co-op clients that are all observing the same resource at the same server. And an example of this example is a PubSub scenario where the server in question is the broker, the resource in question is a topic resource at that broker, and the clients are multiple subscribers. And the idea is for the server here to send a single notification as a one-to-many response over multicast to all the observer clients at once. At the end of the day, in the interest of performance. And the challenge is synchronizing all the clients to be on the same page from a transport point of view and from a security point of view. And that is done by the server, replying to the individual clients as they come with an error response, including all the information they need to do that. And transport information especially is expressed with CRIs defined in the recently approved href document. There's also possible synchronization about security if group OSCORE is used end-to-end between the server and the clients. Okay, some latest updates, and it's two documents now again. So I start with the main one, defining the actual protocol, now in version 13. And other than minor fixes, we had to touch some references. One document got adopted on cacheable OSCORE, and a few more ones that will come back in the next few slides. We also addressed some comments from Ayana. One was related to the newly defined here COP transport information. And in one column, we had multiple fields to be transport related for each particular transport. They used to be separated by a line break. Ayana just told us, well, that is fine, but maybe you want more simple to just have them comma separated. And that was the case, and now it's in the draft. They also suggested for the options defined in this document, now it's one only. The other one was moved to the other document to define at least the range for the preferred for the COP option number. I took a step further, and I think 18 would be a good option number here, and other than be unassigned and consistent with the property of the option. This option is present always in messages that include the observe option, which is number 6. So 18 is just at the limit of the efficient to encode delta of value 12. Just a nice coincidence, I think. Okay, more of the protocol. We had an action pending for a while now, and there were 2 paragraphs in 2 different sections that were using a strange phrasing on not involving link local addresses. It wasn't really clear what we really meant to say, so we tried to expand that. One is thinking of the server side for when returning the response to the clients. And the idea is that, well, that response must not use link local in itself, but then the content of the response in its payload with the information for the clients also must not specify any link local or site local addresses. For the client side, well, it's a simplified version of that. The requests sent by the clients don't have to use link local source or destination addresses. So hopefully it's clear now. Still in the main document, we had some alignment to do with core href. The very last line in this slide is moot, of course now. But on one point, this document is using the CRI identifier in a few instances, mostly for examples. And it used to be defined in href. It was moved to EDN literal. So addressing this was pretty much about changing the reference involved for the sake of the application extension identifier. Then it was about pointing to the right IANA registry involved for the sake of the resolution on the way from the CRI scheme ID practically encoded in the CRIs involved in this protocol to a CRI scheme number to eventually a URI scheme that combined with the authority component can make understand the transport involved, which in turn points to transport specific information for that transport to correctly parse the messages. So the registry to point to is now simply the URI schemes registry that the href draft updated, adding a column for the sake of tracking the CRI scheme numbers. When I wrote this slide, there was still a second registry still defined in the href document. And my hope was that we could simply ignore it anyway and just stick only to the URI schemes. Now that's not even a problem anymore because that registry is simply gone and we can just go for the URI schemes registry. This is even more solid. Okay, but on the main action instead, it was about splitting this into 2 and creating a separate documents like already discussed at 122 and confirmed in 123. The new document was about covering how to use this protocol in setups where proxies are deployed. So for the present main document, now version 13 doesn't have any content about proxies anymore from actual message exchanges to examples. It was all taken away to the new document, and what's left in this main document is only 2 sentences, I think, just clarifying as it is described in this document, the protocol expects client to be able to be ready to receive multicast notifications directly. There may be setups that instead cannot afford that, and for that or other reasons require proxy. And well, how to use this protocol in those setups is described in the new document. Enter the new document, it's version 0, it's informational as intended. We needed to submit things in a certain order, of course. So following Carsten's suggestion, thanks for that, we submitted the new document first, pointing to, well, right now, the second from last version of the main document. So right now we have content about proxies both in the new document and in the version of the main document referred by the new document. But this is just unavoidable transition that is going to be fixed as the new document evolves, because it will just start referring to an appropriate version of the main document where there's no content on proxy anymore. And here it comes back the comment from Ayana on suggesting a range for the COP option that was really specific for proxy setups, now moved here. Yeah, same range, I would say. And 47, I think, would be a good option number for reasons similar to those I mentioned before, because this option is intended only for a request sent to a proxy. And such a request includes proxy URI or proxy scheme. And I think proxy URI has 35 and proxy scheme 39. So again, you are beyond the 12 delta barrier. Again, accidental. Okay, as next steps, I've collected a few here, it's probably not exhaustive. Tracking what we have pending, at some point, Christian suggested the possibility to consider a max age for the first notification produced and stored by the server. I think this needs some more discussion, starting among the authors. I don't think that's meant to mean the max age option, but rather the lifetime to have for the storing of that response locally at the server before a new notification is sent anyway. And then when working on what is now the new document on the proxies, we noted that there are some corner cases where reverse proxies are involved, where a particular entry in the informative response can be redundant. So at a high level, we have two options here. Even we keep it redundant for the sake of simplicity, or we can in the first place define in the main document that field to be should be included, clarifying in an abstract way what warrants an exception, like for the case of reverse proxies. And I think Christian yesterday opened also a new issue on revisiting in the main document the semantics on the option defined there to be applicable not only in responses as needed in the document, but also in the case of requests for general use cases that can benefit of a semantics applied to request. And yeah, I think Christian has a point. It's something definitely to explore. Specifically on the new document, it's going to be aligned for a few rounds, I think, with the main one. And in terms of real content, we just started to work on use cases with reverse proxies. I believe mod document will have to carefully be aligned with other documents that depend on that completed ISG evaluation or last call. And as we address reviews for those documents, of course, there will be an impact on these two ones. Yep, that's all I have. Thank you.
So quick questions, anyone? On the max age thing, there is this thing called leisure in 72052, which this is probably more related to.
Right. Thanks. So I'll select the slides for you, Carles. And then give them to click.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Carlos Gomez, and I'm going to present the last update of the draft entitled Constrained Application Protocol CoAP over Bundle Protocol. My co-author is Ana Calveras. We're both from UPC. First of all, on the status of the document, it was adopted after Madrid as a working group document. The individual draft version that was adopted was 04. We submitted the initial working group document version with the same technical content of the individual draft that had been adopted. And today I'm presenting version 01, which aims to address the review by Marco. Many thanks for the review. And this is the diff of the table of contents. And as you can see, this time there is no new section or subsection. So the structure remains the same as in 00. And now let's go through the updates in the draft. The first are in section folder 3, which defines the new CoAP payload length option. We have added that when encapsulated in a bundle, a CoAP message is represented as a definite length CBOR byte string, and thus the length of the CoAP message is unambiguously represented. And for this reason, we've also stated that the payload length option must not be included in a single message, which, as you may recall, is a message, say a normal message, which is not part of an aggregate message. And in section 431, which discusses the payload length option when OSCORE is used to protect a CoAP message, we have added that the payload length value may need to be subsequently updated after it has been initially set. And this may happen, for example, with the ad hoc plus OSCORE request as described in RFC 9668. Then section 5 provides the details for the bundle that encapsulates a CoAP message. we had already some text about when a coap message needs to be sent in response to an incoming coap message, which are the details for the bundle which encapsulates the response. And we used to have text saying that the source node ID would be the destination endpoint ID of the incoming bundle. However, this would not support very well one-to-many communication. And now we have updated, well, there's still an editorial issue there, but what we want to say is that the source node ID should be the endpoint ID of the endpoint at the bundle protocol level that produces the bundle encapsulating the coap message sent in response. And we have kept that the source node ID may be the null endpoint just in case the source wants to remain anonymous. We did this a bit tentatively, but there was no comments against it yesterday in DTN. And we've added also some content in section 6, which describes coap parameter settings and related times. We've added a bit of content about coap group communication. And in particular, there's one parameter, which is the minimum time between reuse of token values for group requests. This time has to be greater than using the full settings, 500 seconds. However, this is not suitable for many of the bundle protocol scenarios. Bundle protocol is intended for delay tolerant network environments, including deep space. And for many of those environments, this will need to be increased based on the expected delay in the scenario. And we refer the reader to the times which are in Appendix A. And then section 9.3 describes proxy operation and message aggregation. In the previous version of the document, we already had text explaining that a proxy may aggregate coap messages which are destined for the same endpoint. We provided some motivation, which is reducing protocol overhead. However, we have added some more motivation. We have now explained with the help of this scenario, where now we clearly indicate that the clients on the left could be on Earth, the origin servers on the right could be on Mars, and the proxy in between could be in a Mars orbiter. Message aggregation allows to aggregate incoming messages while there's connectivity on one side of the proxy, while perhaps there is no connectivity on the other side. There's always, quite frequently, the possibility of interruptions within involved links and paths. And also we've added that when a proxy attempts to perform message aggregation, there is risk of contributing delay, perhaps unnecessarily in some cases when it has not been possible to really aggregate more than one message. And this means that this function needs to be planned perhaps in advance, tailored to the expected behavior for the particular use case or scenario. Still in the same section, we've also added, also based on suggestion by Marco, that when a proxy aggregates coap messages, the proxy adds the payload length option to each single message before aggregation, and therefore the proxy must recompute the deltas of the outer coap options from each single message that's part of the aggregate message accordingly. And also when a proxy sends a single message that was part of an aggregate message, then the proxy must remove its payload length option before its transmission, and the proxy must also recompute the deltas of the outer coap options accordingly as well. Then section 11 describes securing coap over BP. We already had some text in the previous version stating that in the presence of coap proxies, BPSec cannot ensure the end-to-end protection of application layer data. And for this reason, OSCORE should be used to protect application layer data between the two coap actual endpoints. And we've added that, however, BPSec is still useful to protect all fields of the carried coap message, including the payload length option, which is class U and protected for OSCORE in each BP bundle protocol end-to-end path. That means from the origin coap source until the first coap proxy, or between consecutive coap proxies, or from the last coap proxy until the final coap destination. And still in the same section, Marco commented that about some text we already had, which is that a bundle includes a creation timestamp, a lifetime field, and this provides additional protection against replay attacks. This is a freshness feature, and he also requested to to consider to comment on also the freshness from the perspective of CoAP. So we have added that the echo option in CoAP, as well known by the working group, allows the server to verify the freshness of a request. And however, when the freshness of a request cannot be verified, the server will reject the request and will include the echo option in the response. The client has to resend the original request with that echo option value. So this entails one round trip to check the freshness, which is something that could be important delay penalty in the environments where the bundle protocol would be used. And in a scenario with proxies, the freshness of BP, we've added that it's limited to the scope of a BP path, let's say a BP hop. And however, the echo option, despite the round trip penalty, would be needed to verify the end-to-end freshness of a CoAP request. So these are some considerations. And finally, in the section actual security considerations, we already had some text explaining that there is a risk, which is that when using message aggregation, the payload length option is class U, it's unprotected false core, and an attacker might infer some features of the communication of the individual components of the aggregate message based on the payload size of each one of those. And after a comment, we've added that exposing the individual sizes of the single messages, which are part of an aggregate message, provides more information than just the aggregate message size. And that's all assuming that the latter can be actually obtained by the attacker. So that was my last slide. Not sure if there may be any comment or question.
Yeah, Marco, I have a comment on the previous slide. Yes, you may want to check the use of an option, a new one defined in the cacheable OSCORE document, which is about padding. So with some degree of control, it can help here. I'm not sure, but it may.
Actually, Martina yesterday was in DTM and told me the exact same thing. So I'll definitely do it. Thank you.
And I guess Christian had the very same comment.
Close enough, yes.
Any more comments, questions, anyone? Thank you very much then.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So another thing that we could transport CoAP over, apart from bundle protocol, is GATT, which is Bluetooth Low Energies, like probably most widely used profile for attributes. It has been a while since I presented this here, and even longer since I first started, so I thought I'd like do a brief recap on the why and how. And this is exactly what I showed precisely 5 years ago about what is in scope and why we do this. And the main thing has not really changed. That is, we are occasionally with our end user devices in a situation where that device has radio connectivity to the devices we want to talk to, for example, just any sensor board or so. But we don't have the APIs to set up communication. So we have to use basically whatever we have in that environment. As we had in the browser, WebSockets was like the one way that we can use. And similarly here with Bluetooth, GATT is the thing that we have. That's, I think, not ideal. Ideally, every device that we work with could just be told to, hey, Bluetooth, let's please do a Bluetooth network with that nearby node. But we're living in a world where that is not really possible. None of those APIs are exposed to an end user device, let alone a user in a browser, and that is where often the applications are sitting. Coming back to that previous slide with 5 years into that project, the core thing is still the same. I think this is mainly supposed to be used with end user devices and and constraint devices. But I've seen people use it for other purposes, and there might be good reasons to. I mean, in a sense, if the alternative is not like, let's do it with full IPSP stack versus versus using co-op over GATT, but if it's either we terminate co-op here and then go GATT like with a bespoke protocol into there, or we use this to get co-op one step further and thus extend the OSCurrent ad hoc end-to-end security into that. I think that's quite a fine option to have. So that's the why and the course what. The other question is the how. Oh, sorry, it was still a bit of a what. So what does this do? Co-op over GATT describes a co-op transfer protocol that in its features is similar to UDP. So it can, like in UDP, you can do role reversal. It's not necessarily the Bluetooth central that sends a request to the peripheral, but this can go both ways, unlike in earlier versions of this draft. There can be requests going on at the same time using tokens, as we know it from co-op over UDP. We can have non-traditional responses, such as observations without special casing. There are options for reliable and unreliable transport. Unlike with co-op over UDP, reliable transport is the easier one to implement. So if there's a device that just wants to do the bare minimum, just send messages reliably, and Bluetooth will take care of that. Unlike co-op over UDP, those are not those features are not implemented with the same primitives, because the guarantees that that Bluetooth and in particular GATT gives are different ones. So all of a sudden we do have a means of doing reliable transmission, and we use this. And as a result, the co-op header looks a bit different. Here it's a bit field, like ours reserved, but 3 bits, token length. The rest is pretty much as in every other co-op request, but there's the equivalent of a message ID here is just 1 bit long, because we have a total order on the messages. So we know that we are just going from one state of this thing to the next state of the thing. And that is where all those confirmations are managed. Unlike UDP, this can also do without any timers, because there are plenty of timers already built into Bluetooth. So at the point where there would be retransmission, instead we say that we do a reliable Bluetooth operation, and that is either retried or it fails, but we don't get ever in a situation where we need timers in the first place. Compared to the last time I presented this, there are now more implementations of this. Students around the RadOS project implemented this for a setup where they are talking from one constraint device to another constraint device. So in that space of, we could use IPSP too, but there might be good reasons to do it this way just as well. They have provided good input, and the demo of ACE with co-op with OAuth, like all things combined from a web browser and an app in that web browser talking OAuth to an authentication server, and then getting a token from a device that is connected to via Bluetooth, like this here, is currently being updated to the very latest version of the draft that addresses the concern that were raised by the colleagues at RadOS. So yeah, that's about it from my side in terms of status. The changes between the versions 7 and 8 were relatively minor, mainly addressing the topic of what does it mean to deduplicate. And I think kind of the document should decide its direction, and the alternative to going with this working group would be to follow an individual submission draft path, but I'd hope that this working group would consider adopting this. Thanks.
Thank you, Christian. Any comments, question? So yeah, this document was presented multiple times, and every time I could remember there was quite some interest from different folks as it evolved. Many people left the room because of their flights, but still it's worth checking a bit how things are on this. How many people have read the latest version of the draft? That's typical. how many have read at least one version of the draft? And type in the chat if you are remote. Just as a feeling. I could count 3. Carlos, me, Karsten. Okay. And Mikola read version 7. And Karsten said would like to review. Right. I'm going to ask a question with a show of hands. Oh. So the question is, how many people think that draft AMSUS core co-op over GATT is ready for a working group adoption? Let's give some few more seconds. Okay, that's a good sign. And for the note takers, please take note that 7 people said yes, 2 have no opinion. I think we can start a working group adoption call on the list. Let's see how it goes.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's certainly one way of doing things. One other way would be to solicit a couple of reviews before we do the adoption call, so people who answer the adoption call have those reviews for reference. This is absolutely not a required thing, but if we have more than one person who has reviewing this on their to-do list anyway, that might be a good way to handle this. So is anybody else interested in reviewing this? Carlos? Yeah, I think with 2 reviews, we should be in a position where we can follow this. So how long do we take to do these reviews? 2 weeks from now? Let's shoot for 2 weeks.
Okay, 3 weeks, is it too much?
No.
Okay, let's try, okay.
So this is a call for reviews of this document. Please provide reviews by 3 weeks. And after that, we can have an adoption call, right? Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And next is Christian again.
Yep. This time with a document that I'm co-authoring with Carsten on non-traditional response forms. So this document defines a non-traditional response, which is a response that is not the single response generated for a request, but usually one of multiple responses. And this is not a new concept that is introduced. This has been done almost from the start. This is, for example, happening when there are observation notifications coming in, or when even in a multicast situation, multiple servers send a response, but it did not have a name so far. And I think that what we are seeing here, like from a more general standardization point of view, is an issue about generalization. Observe defined notifications and the conditions under which those would be sent and how long they are sent. But really, there's a more general pattern that non-traditional responses tries to carve out. And not all the instances of this will have all the same properties, but there are many shared properties. For example, flow control will always be just like, yes, regular co-op flow control applies. Just make sure it kind of you do adhere to it. And the same is, in a sense, true for OSCore. Now, I'll jump ahead a bit to first address, kind of visualize the concept of the generalization. Originally, we had RC7252 and then observation 7641 in addition to that. And now with other options that also create multiple responses, such as, for example, sending a multicast request through a proxy, those would get added onto it and make the whole situation a bit more complex. And the idea of using a common term here is that they all can be folded into this concept of multiple responses, and then for implementers act more like a single thing to do. This is especially relevant because that generalization issue turns into an orthogonality issue, because while OSCORE did explicitly state how to handle observations, there was no general terminology that could be used for how to handle anything that is kind of an observation notification. And multicast doesn't quite cut it, because multicast needed an explicit protocol, so we couldn't extend from those two cases I talked about before. So all of a sudden, that setup that worked well, where we have co-op and observations next to it, and then OSCORE on top of it spanning both, would be a hassle to maintain, because every time there's a new option, either OSCORE needs to be updated, or that option, a new document, needs to specify on top of it how OSCORE should handle it. And I'd really prefer that not too many documents talk about how precisely to do OSCORE, because that's kind of a security relevant part, and specifying a new way of transporting, say, multiple blocks at the same time should not require expertise from the authors and the reviewers to assess whether the OSCORE operations are sound. So by doing that folding of the generalization into a single concept of multiple responses, we can also once and for all in spirit apply the rules that were already laid out in OSCORE for notifications, apply them to the generalized concept, and then work from that. So the behavior that is described, I won't go through the details, but the gist is beware about when something could be a replay, when you need to need sequence number, and don't mix the concept of this is a cryptographic replay, and all of a sudden, if we act as if we ignored it, we might get nonce reuse, which is kind of really dangerous. Keep that apart from the application level. Yeah, you may or may not have processed that message before. There have been multiple documents that could have used this. So going through the course list, I mean, observation was kind of the prototype anyway. Co-op over SMS and co-op endpoint ID had talked about how things work with sending a response through another path. So they could have profited from this, but the documents have gone nowhere. Then OSCORE or CS8613 had explicit wording for observe, and 9177 was an early instance of how you could have multiple responses, but that was described to not really work with OSCORE anyway, so kind of it became moot. But now there are documents in the queue. Group comp is far ahead already that it won't use the precise terminology, although it does have an informative reference, because the non-traditional responses that you get from a group of senders are a bit special anyway, so it works well with the informative response, with the informative reference. But for OSCORE capable proxies, where a single client asks in unicast or single proxy to fan out a request to multiple servers and collect, send back individually all those responses that come in, that proxy is again doing something very similar to observation, sending multiple responses through a unicast channel, and there having this document, I think, would be quite valuable to not create one more instance of this orthogonality. The document as a whole has more than just this new concept. It also has instances of the new concept in the form of 3 options. There's response 4, which is basically a setup where there is not a single send request, but no request at all, but there's just a response coming in that says, oh, by the way, if you had just asked me about blah, here's what I told you, what I tell you. So there's the request packed in there. There is leisure for responses, which is kind of a catch-all a non-traditional response option, because an option that establishes non-traditional responses needs to be proxy unsafe. And this option says basically, there will be multiple responses. Proxies, please be prepared to forward them, or kind of don't do that. But be aware, and whatever comes in there is up for negotiation with proxy safe options. And there's a respond to option that allows kind of a triangular message flow. I'm not quite sure where those. Oh, sorry, I should have advanced this earlier. So these are the three options. I'm not quite sure whether they should have a more illustrative or more specifying it out character, but I think that can be explored in the evolution of the document. But speaking of evolution of the document, if this is going to be useful for other documents that that thereby can avoid having to do OSCOR respecifications, I think this would need to be find a home in the working group. So that's again my question of like, can we do that? Is this of general interest, and what are next steps from your point of view?
Thanks, Christian. You want to add anything? As an author? As an author. Okay. Okay, good. Yes, speaking as an individual, I followed this document from the start. I gave at least one review in the past. I think it's useful because, as you mentioned, some of those concepts just came up spontaneously in other works. You mentioned a few of them. Looks like we designed them right, looks like, but it would be good to have this kind of guideline for confirmation and for generalization to be used in other works that can build on these principles. So I believe a document like that would be useful. And just raising up to the attention of everyone, it's informational, by the way. And it can avoid future pitfalls and design mistakes. Okay, that said, I can say that the last version has just minor clarification updates. It's not really changing anything major in the document. So maybe a single conflated question here can be how many have read the document and well, knew it already essentially before this presentation? Write in the chat if that applies. Okay. Do you want to solicit a bit more attention on this document somehow before actually going for an adoption call?
So if I were a working group chair on this document, I would probably propose the same thing I just proposed for the GET document. Let's get 2 reviews in and then do an adoption call.
I can make 1 review on top of a very old one I made. Honestly, was another. It was quite some time ago. Do we have another review in the room now or online? We'll have to find one otherwise.
I think I'd like to ask Göran or Francesca whether they could do one, based on given that this is OSCOR heavy.
So Francesca is probably unavailable right now, but Göran is
Good point. Yeah.
Okay, so you'll get in touch with Göran.
Yes.
This? Okay, but count on me for 1 review. Okay, then let's get some reviews and then we take it from there. Thank you, Christian.
Thank you.
We have a little more than 1 minute before the official end of the meeting. Anything else you want to add for the co-working group? Charles?
Yep, sorry for being remote. I'm just sending an email with respect to an update on what we've been discussing in one of the side meetings with respect to adding some extensions to the core route target IANA registration table for protocols that may need future ones. In this case, our Anima Brewski .star, so to speak. And please check out that email and check the draft where I'm trying to make the update to 6690. Obviously, 6690 being from core, we'll need to have it reviewed and agreed there. The other option we discussed would have been even more complex, like another new RFC. So just wanted to say that. Email is out. Thank you.
Thank you, Thorles. Christian?
One piece of AOB that I'd like to get rid of. If anyone is working on co-op over quick, please let's get all in touch, because I know of at least 2 groups that are kind of interested and having a hard time reaching them all. And please let's just spool this up somewhere.
And now we're really 4:30, at least in Montreal time. Thank you so much on site, online, for your participation and contribution. Have a good trip back home and a good weekend. Thanks.
And have good trips home.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I felt like getting a couple of previous statements.